Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 849. I had the black pieces. My opponent played e4 and I went with d5, the center counter or Scandinavian defense. He took, and I play the knight f6 line. You can see that's the second choice. The main line really is this, queen takes d5, but this is a reasonable alternative. And he played with c4. That's the fourth choice on the list. More commonly played as d4 or one of the knight moves, knight c3 or knight f3. But c4 is not a bad move just yet. It's his next move that's bad. So after c6, this is offering a gambit, and he goes for it. You can see that taking the gambit is really not the main move here. In fact, if I were white here, I would probably play with d4. And this, after black takes, we've actually transposed into the Panov-Botvinnik attack against the Caro-Kann. So interesting little transposition there, and it's a decent line for white. I've played that before. Also, just developing the knight with knight c3. Both these two moves give the pawn back, though. This d takes c6 is a greedy move that tries to hold on to the pawn, but black has a lot of compensation, and this d pawn never makes it to d4. It always gets stopped at d3. Usually white will play a knight move, but then will play d3 pretty quickly. Bishop e2 is a very unusual move here. Oh, but anyway, to continue my thought, black is going to play with e5 and have good control over the center, especially those dark squares, as well as pressure on the backwards pawn and open diagonals towards the king side. So this is just a good gambit position for black, more than enough compensation. So you should always go for that kind of gambit if you can get it. It's good. It teaches you about gambit play too. So anyway, bishop e2 is out of the opening book. We can just look at the notation page. I continue with e5, which is the main idea, and he goes knight f3. And knight f3 is a mistake in this position. He really needs to play d3 at this point, because I've already played e5 and he needs to stop me from playing e4. And I wasn't really thinking. I was just continuing with my routine setup with bishop c5. So his knight f3 is a blunder, but my bishop c5 is a blunder too. I have the opportunity to play e4 right here. It's a move I think about a little later in the game, but right here is when it's most effective. Chases his knight to this square. I don't even have to react to this threat on my pawn because my pawn is defended. There is no threat. I can immediately kick his knight with h6, and it has to go back to this bad square. Or the knight could have retreated to g1 as well. In either case, instead of going to g5, it could have gone back to g1. But in any case, the knight is sent to a worse position, and black really has an excellent position here, winning according to the chess engine, although I wouldn't go that far necessarily. It's pretty early in the game. Anyway, I continued with my normal development here, which is not a bad move. It's just that I had a better move, and I should have been a little more awake at this early stage of the game instead of playing routinely. Anyway, he castled, I castled. There's still opportunities to play e4, and it probably should have been played in each of the next few moves up to the point where I finally play it. Knight c3, I go a6. Even here I could have played e4, and I'll show you in a second. Let's see, played b3, and then here I got the idea. I was at least starting to think about e4, having completed my setup, and I played h6 to take away the g5 square from the knight. But the chess engine points out I can really just play e4 right away, and could have played it on any of the preceding moves. And if his knight goes here, I can pin the other knight. And this is a good square for my bishop anyway. Pins the knight against the rook. And of course, the pawn can also be defended with my rook. So eventually I'll get to kick his knight back to a bad square. So once again, this would be good for me. h6 is just unnecessary, and it gives him time to play d3. And so he's got a playable position now, although I still think this is a good gambit position for black. Nothing. It's not like white has any kind of big advantage here, but black's compensation for the pawn has been diminished a little bit because of my inaccurate play. Anyway, I continue with bishop to f5. He goes bishop to e3. Oh, and here I play knight d4, which actually, I put a question mark by it because I didn't pay attention and I didn't realize I was leaving the e-pawn hanging. But actually, knight d4 is one of the best moves in the position. The chess engine slightly prefers queen e7, and still with compensation for the pawn, so it thinks that black is still doing fine here. It gives a slight edge to white at this point, but even after knight d4, it only gives a slight edge to white. So the fact that I'm 2 pawns down at the moment, and white only has a slight edge, means that I have lots of compensation, and the way I play it for the next few moves is correct. So I made a nice recovery after forgetting that I needed to defend the e-pawn. I made a nice recovery here and played some good moves. So rook e8 is the right response. He defends the knight with f4. There are other ways to defend, but they all run into various problems. But this f4 move leaves his bishop undefended here, and I'm able to exploit that. And so this move here, knight takes e2, bringing the queen into the line of fire of the rook, is correct. And then bishop takes e3 is okay, but the best move here is bishop takes d3. And that just shows the power of getting your pieces on open lines, and when your opponent's pieces have not quite fully developed, you can often catch them in these somewhat awkward situations. So there's no way for him to recapture. I mean, it looks like at first I'm just giving up a piece, but in the end I always get the bishop here. So the best line, according to the chess engine, is queen takes, momentarily keeping this bishop defended, but after the queen trade, then I can grab that. And so I've gotten my pawn back. I'm still 1 pawn down, but I have an active position here. So king h1, bishop d4, and the chess engine once again gives black an equal game here, roughly. So that means good compensation for the pawn. So it's still a good gambit for black, even in this position. So the way I played it, white comes out with a slight edge, so it's not quite as accurate. I took here. He took with the queen, and then I played knight to g4, taking advantage of the pin on the knight. Let's see, he went queen to g3, and I went knight takes e5. It may look like this check here is going to pick up this knight, but well, my knight is hanging too, so it doesn't actually win material at this point. So the way I play is just fine. Knight takes e5, f takes e5. And then queen takes d3. This was a bit of a mistake. Bishop takes d3 is better. Well, we'll come back to that move. First, let's take a look once again at queen to d3 check. It keeps looking like there's a tactic here where I can win a piece. But, well, in this case, it's my bishop that's hanging. It's always something I have that's hanging. So he can block the check with his queen. If I take the knight, he takes my bishop. So I just don't gain any material that way. So queen d4 is not the best move. The best move here is really bishop takes. And then I was worried about the pin. So the trick is I play queen d4 now, and then the king moves, and then I grab his knight, and he can grab my bishop. So it's not like I'm winning a piece here, but after he grabs my bishop, then I get this pawn, and so the get into a position where I have that actually equalizes the material, and it's okay, an okay position for black. So that's the best way to play it. Let's see. I played queen takes d3, and this lets him, if he wants to, trade queens and go into an endgame where he's, well, it's closer to an endgame. I guess it's an endgame with just 2 rooks on and a minor piece, where he is a pawn up and he's holding on to it for the moment. So my inaccurate play there finally did give white an advantage here, which he could have cashed in on by trading queens. So his mistake was to play rook f3 here, and we are back in the range of about even. I'm going to be down the pawn for a while, but I still have the compensation. I guess I get the pawn back in this line. So queen d4 check, king h1, and rook takes e5. Yeah, so I've gotten my pawn back, and my pieces are active. So I think black is a little better here, but not necessarily winning. Black really, I mean white, really gives away the game away in a move or two. Let's see, he played rook A to f1 here, and so I drop my bishop back. I defend the f7 square. Played knight to d5, trying to get that knight to a good position and upset my piece coordination here. Maybe get my queen stranded, but it's not in immediate danger. So I just bring my rook out to e1, and then you know, the chess engine gives black a slight edge here, but move like h3 for white. So obviously there's no big plan for white, but maybe just giving the king a little lift, and it seems like it's a playable position, and the game could continue. Instead he played rook takes f7. So he must have seen something here, must have miscalculated something. Obviously I can't take with the king, but I can take with the bishop, and he does have this check, but the check just wins back the exchange. It doesn't win the piece back. So he gave up the rook, and the best he can get out of it is an exchange. Let's see, I went king f8. I thought he was just going to take, and I was going to take back. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to take back. I guess it's better to take back with the rook. But anyway, he went for the check. So I went back, and he went for the check again. So obviously I don't want to draw at this point, so I moved my king to the other square, and now he went knight g4. He should probably just take the rook, and then he would be a piece down for a pawn. He would have one pawn, so, and I would have a bishop. So probably losing. Anyway, he tried to keep material on, but this just gives me more. Just gives me more material, so a bigger edge. And so I keep the edge through the rest of the game. There was one nice tactic I wanted to show. I don't need to go through this play by play, but right here when I played rook h1, winning the queen, there already was a forced mate. So if you want to see if you can find your checkmating skills, why don't you see if you can find the mate for black in this position. Okay, pause the video if you want time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. So the most accurate way to play this is to bring this rook up and check. And if the king runs anywhere, he gets mated. So he has to block with the rook. And now the move I didn't see, and I don't know if you saw it, it's queen d6 check. And now the rook is pinned, and so it can't block the check, so the king has to run. And either of the two squares it runs to, it gets mated. If it goes to, it can't go to h2. If it goes to h3, then the rook to h1 mates. And if the king runs to f2, then the other rook can come down and mate. And in both cases, the queen is blocking off the escape squares. So that would have been a mate in 3, and that would have been the quickest way to finish the game. And anyway, I just went for the material here. And I missed some other mates along the way, but this is all completely winning, going for a position where I'm a queen up. So I just mop up the pawns, and eventually he decides to resign. Let's go forward to the end of the game here. Yeah, just get my queen out of the way so I don't end up stalemating him. And now I'm just going to bring this pawn in with the. Turn it to a queen with a check and bring the queen over to mate. So he decided to resign at this point. Anyway, it was a fun game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.